Monday, tomorrow, is of course St. Valentine's Day. Legend has it that St. Valentine was a Catholic priest in Rome around the year 255 AD during Emperor Valerian's persecution of the church. Father Valentine, in being faithful to his ministry, is said to have disobeyed the orders of the emperor and performed Christian weddings. However, he was caught and imprisoned. So his devotion to the sacrament of matrimony and his willingness to take those risks and to suffer for the sacrament, that is his connection to romantic love. It's also said that while Father Valentine was imprisoned, he healed the jailer's daughter of her blindness, causing the jailer's whole family to convert to Christianity. And while that was a great outcome, Father Valentine was a zealous priest and not satisfied with just that. It's said that he pleaded with the Roman officials to grant him an audience with the emperor himself in hopes of converting the emperor to Christianity. For his zeal to bring others to Jesus, including the emperor, Father Valentine, he sufficiently annoyed people that he was sentenced to death. Before being beheaded on February 14th, he sent the jailer's daughter, who he had cured of her blindness, a note, a farewell note, presumably, and signed it, "Your Valentine." And this is, of course, his connection to the custom of school children and others exchanging cards and other expressions of love and friendship on February 14th. So I, in my own mind, I for some time have wanted to understand they seem like different things, right? The romantic love and school-age children exchanging little cards, and so that's kind of his connection to both of those expressions of love. So I hope you have a great St. Valentine's Day tomorrow. St. Valentine, pray for us. We will also benefit from the prayers of St. Jeremiah. And some people don't recognize, and it's probably not immediately obvious, that these Old Testament prophets, these are saints, right? So St. Jeremiah, St. Moses, St. Elijah. St. Jeremiah, the prophet, that's who we heard from in our first reading. And as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, at least at one of these masses, Jeremiah's prophetic ministry, it spanned the 40 years prior to Jerusalem being destroyed by the Babylonians in 587 BC. And during this time, Jerusalem was situated between two major world powers. Babylon was to the east and the north, roughly Iraq, where modern-day Iraq is. And, of course, their historical biblical enemy, Egypt, to the west and south. And both of these nations were powerful and interested in expanding their control and even their borders to include Jerusalem, but only one of these two. It's one or the other. So it was like Jerusalem was caught in between a rock and a hard place, so to speak, almost in a kind of a tug of war. So when Babylon was powerful and threatening, as it was during Jeremiah's ministry, it was natural for the Jewish king in Jerusalem to look to Egypt for help to defend Jerusalem from Babylon. Jeremiah, however, was against this. He was against looking to other nations. And it probably, given that Jeremiah was a priest and a prophet, almost certainly for not political but theological reasons, right? At that time, every nation had its own God, so to speak, and Jeremiah would have been a strict monotheist, just the God of Israel, and to trust in anyone else was verboten, no bueno. That's not allowed. And so Jeremiah, extremely unpopular prophet, he thought that they ought to just suffer for their sinfulness, especially sins of idolatry. They ought to just be willing to suffer, to be conquered by Babylon, and allow God himself to save them in his own time and way, even if that meant that they would be conquered for some time. And his prophecy, in fact, came true when they were saved after being conquered by Babylon. They were saved in the most unlikely of ways when 50 years later, Persia defeated Babylon. So basically, modern-day Iran, the powers there, defeated the powers in modern-day Iraq. And Cyrus, their king, said, go home. The Babylonians had taken the Jewish people to Mesopotamia. When Cyrus conquered the Babylonians, he said, go home. And so God did save them in that most unusual of ways. We too will be tempted to trust others instead of God, other things, other people. We will be tempted to trust people, things, entities, organizations, rather than God. And this might be especially evident when we consider our strivings for happiness, right? So many things we do, even in our daily lives, fundamentally are done because we think in some way they will make us happy. So in our striving for happiness, we can perhaps identify where we are tempted and even do trust people, things, organizations other than God. With tomorrow being St. Valentine's Day, and I mentioned that romantic love, some, especially perhaps young people, will be tempted to look for ultimate and unfailing happiness in a romantic relationship. Unfortunately, no human being is capable of delivering these goods, right? As those married among us perhaps would be able to testify, that no human being can deliver perfect, unfailing love. And so it's simply God created the human heart for this perfect love, and only God can satisfy it. So these unrealistic expectations can lead, and often do, lead to romantic relationships failing. Others will place their trust in money, thinking that possessions that one can acquire with money or the experiences that one can have with money will deliver unfailing and perfect happiness. But these two fail, right? And sadly, I can attest, we think this one experience will be good, but then we need a better one, and it can go on and on and on, and they simply don't deliver. Like, they don't deliver the goods. They don't deliver perfect and unfailing happiness. Still others will spend their time in pursuit of things like success, fame, or power, thinking that these will provide unfailing and perfect happiness. Tragically, we see some of our most famous celebrities who on that track fall into despair and make terrible decisions, right? It can't deliver, and then at the risk of rubbing salt into wounds, those of you who are Minnesota sports fans, who have invested yourself in things like Super Bowl trophies, will recognize that this never pays off, right? It always fails. In the gospel, especially the Beatitudes, Jesus recognizes that some of us who are wealthy and healthy and well-connected, and by biblical standards, almost all of us are fabulously wealthy. To think that someone would have indoor plumbing at the time of Jesus, is an outrageous idea, right? Jesus recognizes that with wealth and health and well-connectedness, we are prone to trust in our many natural resources as sources of our ultimate happiness, so much so that we might turn these alluring people and things into false gods, right? Turn these things, people, institutions into false gods that I think we get a sense when something is going from being just perhaps an interest or something we enjoy into a false god, is when that thing begins to crowd God out of our life, when it begins to take up a space that ought to belong to God. It might be our time, our attention, our money. When it begins to crowd God out and exclude God, then it is certainly becoming an idol, a false god, right? And we'll be tempted to do this, to take in those false gods, and they end up displacing the one true God from our lives. What Jesus wants for us is that instead of trusting in human beings and things in our pursuit of unfailing and perfect happiness, that we will trust in him, knowing that by his passion, death, and resurrection, he has defeated the enemies that sadden us: sin, death, and the devil. And Jesus, of course, has given us the sacraments, especially his real presence in Holy Communion, to share his life and love with us. So may we trust in Jesus as the source of our ultimate and unfailing happiness, and experience that happiness in our relationship with him, especially in receiving him in the most blessed sacrament.